Thank you very much. And yes, it's true. I'm very sorry I'm late. In Denmark, we always ride our bicycle, as you know. And this morning, my bicycle was broken, so I needed to borrow another one. But here I am, and I'm very glad that I managed to come, because I've been looking very much forward to greeting you here today. Because this arrangement is so important for all our youngsters, but also for our city. So dear hosts and participants from around the world, in Europe, we see barbed wire at many borders right now. In the US, Donald Trump even talks about building a big wall, and radicalized groups try to spread fear and divide us. Danish-Arab interfaith dialogue represents just the opposite. You who are here today build bridges between religions, countries, and most important of all, people. That should remind all of us here today that we share a common responsibility. Each of us can make a difference. Only if we think that real changes can happen, we can make a difference. And we need changes. We need to have less radicalization, less violence, and less young people who feel that they are not at home in their own country. And we need to have more understanding and more peace. For the sake of our children, we cannot accept to lose any more to radicalization. That is why I am so very grateful to be invited to come here today. Thank you so much for organizing and hosting this very important conference. I'm also very pleased that you asked me to share with you how we work to prevent radicalization and extremism in Copenhagen, because we find that work very, very important. All over the world, large towns and cities are challenged by increasing radicalization among young people in Europe and in the Western world. That is, of course, a great concern for all politicians, but also for all citizens, because we have seen how devastating the consequences can be. From the tragic attacks in Paris to similar events in Beirut, Brussels, and also right here in Copenhagen. That is why it has been so deeply disturbing to see that in the previous years there was an increase in young people traveling to Syria and Iraq from the West to fight for ISIL. That calls for action. And already back in 2009, we started our counter-radicalization program that we called VINK, because it's a Danish word, but it is about knowledge. The main objective is preventing marginalization and social exclusion of young people that lead to radicalization. Our experience so far shows that the individuals who become radicalized in Copenhagen have come from marginalized family backgrounds. Our efforts, therefore, are directed towards helping them back into our society. VINK has set up a hotline that parents, friends, and teachers can call if they are concerned about a person that might be in risk of radicalization. From 2010 to 2015, we have been contacted more than 200 times regarding specific concerns for radicalized individuals here in Copenhagen alone. A great majority of these have occurred in the last 2 years. One of our current main concerns is young people who travel to Syria or Iraq to take part in the militant conflict. In total, it is estimated that 135 Danes have left Denmark to join the civil war in Syria. More than half of the Danish foreign fighters have returned to Denmark. Approximately 27 are estimated dead. Our challenge now is to reach out to those that have returned to Denmark. We must make sure that they find their way back into society as democratic citizens, as young people who feel like they belong to their home country. Radicalization for us can be both of a religious and political nature. It can happen in all religions, and in terms of political radicalization, it can be both right-wing and left-wing extremism. In Scandinavia alone, we have seen many examples of right-wing extremism and radicalization in recent years. 5 years ago, we experienced the horrible terrorist attack in Norway. 69 people were killed by a right-wing terrorist. Many of them were children. In the recent 2 years, we have furthermore seen more than 20 refugee centers in Sweden being set in fire. In Denmark, the intelligence services have for many years documented how a large majority of hate crimes in Denmark are committed against Muslims and immigrants. These crimes also need to be recognized and dealt with and addressed in the same way that we work with preventing Islamist radicalization. I only mention this to show you that we take it very serious and that in my opinion, all kind of radicalization and extremism is something that we have a responsibility to fight. But unfortunately, the media only focused on one kind of radicalization. What we have done in Copenhagen is very simple. We have tried to do our best, even though it's a very difficult subject. We have set up an expert group to prevent radicalization last year. The expert group has 3 main recommendations that I want to present for you today. The first one is to strengthen coordination and information exchange between relevant authorities. That is not rocket science, but we were not good at that in the past. For instance, by expanding our excellent cooperation with the police, with a cooperation between the prison and probation service and municipal authorities, we can do a difference for the young people. The goal is to secure that prison inmates who are already radicalized or at risk of radicalization receive the necessary support or receive the relevant municipal help after their release. Not 1 week after or 2 weeks after, immediately after their release. The second recommendation is to strengthen collaboration, as Anders Gadegaard told you before, with civil society. That is something I feel like is the most important initiative, and it is also something that the Danish Intelligence Service have told us to do. This recommendation points at both civil society and general, and more specifically parents and in general, and more specifically also our relationship with parents and families and friends. The recommended course for family and relatives should focus on parental roles, skills in everyday life, and rights and duties and norms in our democratic society. But also, it is our main focus to include more young people who feel like they are not included but excluded right now. The third recommendation that I want to mention for you today is that the city of Copenhagen strengthened its contact with radicalized environments and individuals. And that is maybe controversial in some ears. Municipal frontline staff should have a mandate to contact radicalized individuals or young people who are in danger to be radicalized, and they should also have the mandate to contact those organizations and environments where the radicalized young people are today. And the reason that they need that mandate is to prevent further radicalization and to promote the individual's motivation to break loose from those environments. We have already implemented many of the recommendations here in Copenhagen. And I believe it's very important to state that Copenhagen is an example for how you can do it different around the world. You don't need to focus on border control and on taking the young people's passport. You need to do something different, and you need to focus on the civil society. And actually, I have in different international networks, and they, right now, pay attention to what we are doing in Copenhagen, because they know that it is not enough to take the young people's passport, to make border control, and so on. Last year, I was invited to New York to speak to a number of cities that are deeply engaged in counter-radicalization. And among other things, they listened when we talked about how we had a very deep and very strong relationship with all of you, not all of you, but many of you who are here today, and also many of your dear colleagues who are not here today. And that is actually what I feel like is the most important part of our program. Of course, as a municipality, we also need to be aware of whom we are collaborating with, because, let's face it, we are a political organization indeed. Therefore, what we have tried to do as a solution to that potential problem is that we have launched a democratic charter. The democratic charter is to ensure that the civil society associations work from a shared platform of democratic values and principles. Of course we are doing that. We are here in Denmark. We all are very proud of our democratic values and principles, but we need to send a strong signal to all of them who thinks that it is not common sense, also in the political environment. The Democratic Charter has been crafted on the basis of similar charters in London and other major European cities. The Charter's values is based on basic human rights. Everyone can sign that charter, in my opinion. 32 associations from civil society have signed so far. And I'm very grateful that many of you here today have not only supported us, but have also contributed in how we need to communicate that charter and how we need to make it. So thank you very, very much. And I'm looking very much forward to work together across religious and cultural differences in our joint mission in counter-radicalization, so we together can ensure that inclusion of our youth in society is not something that we talk about in 10 years. It's just something that we do together. And that is why we need that democratic charter, so that no one can question our common goal. I'm very proud to stand here today, and also to stand here today in Copenhagen and see the united presence of religious leaders across different religions here in Copenhagen. That is amazing, in my opinion. And by speaking with one united voice, you and we can show those people who try their best to cause strife and disharmony that peace and coexistence is indeed possible, not only in Copenhagen, but in all over the world. Despite differences and despite different opinions, we can unite in a common belief on the democratic values and on a better future for our young people. You and we have initiated several projects in the upcoming years that enables a cross-religious collaborations between the Christian, Jewish and Muslim community, and that is so important today. So thank you very, very much. I will end where I started. I will end by pointing out that building bridges between different minorities and combating hate and prejudice is so important today, and what you're doing here with this conference, I can't thank you enough. The topic will be related to being a minority. The topics will be also need to address to being a minority, being different, and having a religious outlook that looks different from the common Danes. We also need to talk about that, not today, but I need to tell you that that is something that we take very serious because it is linked together. So thank you very, very much for letting me speak here today. I'm looking forward to the further dialogue and also to the further collaboration with all of you who are here today, but also all of those people that you represent and all of them who are not here today. So thank you very much.
Skal vi se om der er nogen, det er ikke sikkert. The mayor, Anna May Allerslev, has a few minutes left. If you want to ask her a question or two, we can accommodate that. What do you think about that? Riyad? Perhaps you need a mic. Dr. Riyad Shashur is the General Secretary of our partner in Lebanon, the Arab Group for Christian-Muslim Dialogue.
I definitely, and I think all my colleagues do appreciate very much what you have been doing. And we do know from even our first encounter here in Copenhagen about your encounter and what you have been trying to do to the Muslim community and to other immigrants. And I would like to assure you that all of us appreciate what you are doing, and we would love to take you as a wonderful model that other people in Europe can follow. That's number one. Number two, my question is, how much do you think those people whom you want to have them being in the process of integration are willing to be integrated? I do know that so many are not interested in integration, and the big example is of the Turkish community that has been in Germany for decades and yet no integration. And the third, I do know that this is a big burden that all these immigrants come in because of the Syrian and the Iraqi crisis. Why don't you do with other European countries and with the US, and I'm happy that Peter is here to listen to this, to see what are the root causes that made these immigrants run away from their countries. They have been living there for somehow, you know, if, okay, with this big slogan, democracy, no real democracy, and there is no real democracy anywhere in the Arab world, even now in other countries. But why don't we see how we can fight these root causes and find a solution so these people don't leave their countries? And how can we find a way for these people to go back to their countries? We don't want to lose them. We are losing the best of our people and our communities, whether Christians or Muslims.
And what are the advices?
And my advice that you cooperate to really address the causes that made these people immigrate and leave. And that's where you shouldn't only focus on your work on how to cope with those who are immigrating here, but of those who are still there and need a safe haven, security, peace, good economy, and they can survive in dignity in their own land. Thank you.
Thank you for those questions. The last thing first. One of my dear friends is from Lebanon, and he asked me exactly the same thing. Sorry, I thought you said you're from Lebanon. Okay, both. There's no simple or easy way to answer a very complex question. But I feel like we need to do all three things that you're pointing on. We need to welcome those refugees who come here to Copenhagen, to come here to Europe these days. We need to welcome them. We need to find them jobs, help them finding jobs. We need to help the young people and the children who come here to have an education. And also, very, very important for us in Copenhagen, we need to make real inclusion in our society. So what we're focusing on right now is to make real inclusion so that they feel that Copenhagen, maybe not all of the rest of their life, but right now is their real home. They feel like they belong here and that they are welcome here. So that is what we can do when they come. But I agree with you that, Professor, that was what, yeah? I agree with you, Professor, that it is very important that Denmark and all other European countries also use resources in the countries that are in the conflict zones. And we also do that. But I don't agree with my colleagues on in the parliament who say that that is the only thing that we need to do. Just send money and don't take responsibility here in Copenhagen. Unfortunately, that is actually what many parties and many politicians are saying here in Europe. We don't need to take care of those people who come here. We need to send them back, and then we can just send money. I don't agree with that, and I didn't hear you saying that either. I think we need to do both. But I also heard you say something, have a third point, and that is also that we need to take responsibility for the conflict, for the war, as a part of the international society. And it is easy for me to say that that is outside my jurisdiction as a mayor in Copenhagen, but I am a human being, I am a politician, I am a citizen in Denmark, so of course I have an opinion. And I feel like that the international society needs to take action, needs to do not just more, because we are actually not doing very much, but we need to take a different approach to the conflict right now. I don't know exactly what we need to do, and that is not the place to discuss it, I think, but I feel like that we need to do much more as both a part of the European Union, but also as a part of the international society.
Yes, I also have a question. Thank you very much for your talk and for your courage to pursue your own policies and not just listen to national politicians when it comes to these issues.
Jakob, please tell Anna who you are.
I think we know each other.
Okay.
I'm a professor of Arabic and Islamic Studies at the University of Copenhagen. But I've been a little bit concerned about the approach to refugees from Syria now in Denmark. Not in Copenhagen, because we are only just about to receive them, but in the country as such, because on both the left and the right, there's a strong emphasis that they must get a job instantly, which I think is a good idea. That's where you can not only get money, but also self-respect and so on. But as we say in religion, man does not live from bread alone. And we tend to treat them as if that would be the only thing they are looking for or in want of. And that will mean that there will be a lot of soul fishing, also from radical groups. So these people who may be pushed into some sort of work, but when work ends, they've got very little to do, they don't have the language capacities to do anything. I see a looming problem that we've actually seen before in Denmark, that we consider culture irrelevant, or we tell them that we have a fantastic culture, and you have to get rid of your culture in order to adopt my culture, your new culture, as if it were some sort of zero-sum game. And I see this being repeated sadly. So I would try to appeal to not just you, but to maybe religious organizations, that the very fact that you go together, Christians and Muslims and Jews, is of extreme importance for the Syrians who come here to see. Not that it's totally alien to them, because Syria has been a place where intercommunal relations used to be very good, but they're certainly not very good anymore. And they should be invited into such a culture, I think, in a much more active and proactive way than we are seeing now. And I would like to add that Syrian culture is much more than religion. It's also film, it's modern literature, it's many things that we in Denmark tend to forget when we look upon them. To offer something and to share something about that with them does not mean that we will not make them Danes. It means that we will fortify them in making them Danes, but also maybe in one day returning to their country. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question and remarks, because it gives me the opportunity to elaborate a little bit about what I said in the end of my speech. 3 things. 1, I think we need to focus on the job and education issue, because it's very hard to be a real part of the society here in Denmark if you don't have a job, if you don't are a part of the community that are at a workplace, all your colleagues. It is there you learn Danish, it is there you learn how to be a part of a new country, which norms, which culture there are. And also, it's where you gain your self-respect, because those people who come here, they're used to have their own money. They're used to not being dependent of the society. So I feel like it's extremely important that we focus on job and education for the young people. But I agree with you, that is not enough. We can see that not so much in Denmark, but I'm very afraid that it starts coming. But we can see that in other Western world, it's not enough to be well-educated, high-paid, well-respected. If you don't feel like you are a real part of the society, if you don't have another community than the community you have at your work, you're not really included in the society. So what we have done in Copenhagen is that we are focusing on job and education from day one, but my message to my colleagues and to my staff is that that is not enough. So we managed to get a rather big amount of resources, money and resources, people, to build upon that effort to have a job for the refugees from the beginning, to have all the civil society, all the organizations we have in Denmark in the civil societies to come together, to include them in the cultural life, in their homes, in their sports clubs, in all those kind of different activities we have in Denmark and that we are proud of in Denmark, and not include them by we are helping you to be Danes, or now you need to learn how it is to be a Dane. To include them in a real way where you become friends and where you respect each other and where you accept each other, and not only accept but also look at each other's differences and find and make a better society with exactly those differences. That is our goal, and that is why we have the integration effort with job and education, but also what I call the inclusion effort initiatives, that is about all those things that you address now. So I really feel like it is important that we're not only focusing on job and education, but that is something that we need to be better at than we used to be, but we need to focus on the civil society initiatives also. But I said there is 3 things. My last remarks is that I'm also very sad about the political discourse and initiatives here in Denmark and also in many municipalities. But the municipalities are a little different. But anyway, we are not talking about diversity and the strength in diversity anymore. We are not even talking about integration anymore. We are talking about assimilation, as you said. And that is something that makes me very sad as a mayor of integration, as a mayor of diversity, because it is very, very painful for those individuals who feel like they're not a real part of the society, who feel like they're not recognized, and who feel like it is not okay to be themselves and to be Danes as themselves. But it is also very dangerous for Copenhagen and for Denmark, because if you travel to Amsterdam, to Berlin, to London, and even to Paris also, they are much more focused on the strength in diversity than we are in Copenhagen. And Copenhagen is probably the most diverse city is the most diverse city in Denmark. So I also are afraid of the future, because we need to be more international. We need to acknowledge the strength in diversity more if we need to survive as a small, small country in a big, big world.
One more.
Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Matt Officer. I'm the Secretary of the Islamic Council of Norway. In your presentation or in your speech, you said that many Muslims and immigrants are attacked in Copenhagen as well. Why do you differ between Muslims and immigrants? Because I was following the crisis in Europe we had 22 years ago in Bosnia, where Bosnians were only mentioned as Muslims and others were mentioned as Serbs and Croats. So this is one thing. And the second thing is we all talk about the different factors, elements that can get people into those extreme environments. I live in Norway. I've been there almost my whole life. I think as a Norwegian, I think as a part of the society. But what I really miss is also here in Denmark is that we never talk about what our European contribution in wars in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Libya, what have that done to Muslim youth, their mentality in Europe? We just don't talk about this. I think this is a very important issue.
Yeah.
And also, if I have a problem with word radicalization. I mean, it should not be criminal to be a radical person. So I hope that you get the point. We should work against extremism, against violent extremism and terrorism. But so those three things. Thank you.
I think I
The
need
last-
to explain that Allerslev belongs to a political party which in Danish is called the Radical Party.
Yeah, that is something that people find very funny. But I actually agree with you. And what we also know that we need to be very aware of is that sometimes counter-radicalization programs can actually cause more radicalization. Not maybe directly, but indirectly. And that is not something that I feel like. That is something our experts are telling us. So, of course, we need to be very careful with the wordings. And I try to be very careful, but sometimes it's difficult because if you are very careful with your wordings, or if you are very political correct in Denmark, it's very weird, but then people will not listen to you. For example, if I insist on talking about diversity instead of integration, people will not take me seriously. But that is not an excuse for not being careful with your wordings. And I agree that radicalization is not in a free world with free speech and freedom of speech and free thoughts. It's not illegal. The real problem is violence, extremism, and radicalization that leads to violence. And that is also something that if I've made a speech in Danish, I would probably have made it more clear what the real focus is. That is one thing. The other thing was the same issue that the professor addressed, the first professor addressed. I think it's important for you to know that our intelligence service actually are very aware of how Denmark's role in international conflict are affecting the Danish society locally. That is something they are very aware of, and that is also something that we sometimes debate in the parliament, not at the municipality level, but in the parliament. I also feel like it's important that it's not, in my opinion, it is not the society's fault that young people are being attracted to extreme environments or that they become violent, but it is our responsibility to do something about it. Because I also feel like we need to talk about the individual responsibility, and it's always an individual choice, an individual responsibility. But as a society, we can do and we should do a lot of things to prevent those individuals from becoming violent and becoming extreme in their behavior. Was that, you said three things?
The
Yeah, yeah, that was what I tried to say, that the intelligence service.
I really missed that debate.
Yeah.
At that level, at that scale.
Yeah. When we talk outside the media, outside public spaces, when we talk to the intelligence service, here in Denmark, and when they give us advice or when we have a dialogue, they always start their presentation by emphasizing how our contribution or how our participating in international conflicts affect Denmark here locally. So maybe you are right, or you are probably right, that we are not talking so much about it in the public. It's not a part of the public debate. Sometimes it is actually in Denmark and in the national parliament, but maybe it is maybe it's not enough. But I also feel like we need in this environment, us who share the same beliefs, that we also need to not take the responsibility away from those individuals who decide to become, not to decide to become, but who decide to be violent. Of course, we have a responsibility to prevent it, and we can only have a vain hope that all of the things that we are doing prevent it. But we must not take the responsibility away from those individuals. That is my opinion.
And the third thing was that, as you mentioned, that we tend to separate between nationalities, but we regard often Muslims as one group.
Yeah, yeah.
Serbs,
Sorry, yes.
And Muslims.
Yeah, and that is, yeah. That was your first question. I think that, as I said before, I try to be very careful with my wordings, because I believe that words create reality, and words can also be both a very powerful weapon, but also the opposite. So I try to be very careful, but I think that you have a very, very good point in that we are not specific enough when we talk about different problems, and especially in this debate, there is a big lack of nuances, and there is a big lack of, especially politicians, and also me, who try to be very specific, who are correct in what we address, and that is very, very that is a very, very big problem, and it's not only us as a politicians, it is also the media. So, point taken. I try to be careful, but I agree with you. We need to be more specific, because of course it's not the same. I think that when I talk in Danish, I use the terms Danes with another background than Danish. When I talk about different immigration, when I talk about different Danes who have not Danes as a background, ethnic background. Sometimes I also talk about Asian Danes and Danes, or more specific. But we're not that good. We're not good at that in Denmark. They are actually in the United States, I think, better than we are. And also we are not good at differentiating in different kind of Muslim groups. I know, and I agree. So I will take that with me home.
Thank you so much, Allerslev.